Remember those family meals from the 1950s, the ones that showed up on the table week after week like clockwork? They were simple, comforting, and made with love, no matter what was in the fridge. These 30 forgotten dishes brought everyone together. Now it's time to remember them. Tuna noodle casserole. Tuna noodle casserole, a dish that perfectly embodies the heart and soul of 1950s family cooking. This beloved meal was a weeknight savior for busy moms, a one-dish wonder that came together with just a handful of pantry staples. The beauty of it lay in its simplicity: tender egg noodles, creamy tuna, a generous helping of peas, and a comforting, velvety sauce made from cans of cream of mushroom soup. When baked, it transformed into a golden, bubbly casserole that fed the family for mere cents a serving. This dish wasn't just about feeding the masses, it was about stretching ingredients, making the most of what you had, and creating something warm and satisfying. In an era where convenience was king, tuna noodle casserole was a shining example of resourcefulness, often assembled from ingredients that were always on hand. The tuna, often a pantry staple thanks to its long shelf life, came together with noodles to create a meal that was filling, flavorful, and reliable. There's something so nostalgic about the way the casserole would bubble away in the oven, the top slowly browning to a perfect crisp, while the interior remained creamy and comforting. It wasn't a gourmet dish by any means, but that's part of its charm. It was real food meant to be enjoyed by real families. If you were lucky, it was served with a side of crispy bread or a simple salad, making it the kind of meal that could fill you up and leave you with a warm, satisfied feeling long after the last bite. A dish like tuna noodle casserole doesn't just fill the stomach, it fills the heart too. Meatloaf with mashed potatoes. Meatloaf with mashed potatoes, this hearty, comforting duo was the epitome of a classic 1950s family dinner. A dish that could stretch a small amount of ground beef into a meal that fed an entire family, meatloaf quickly became a weeknight favorite. The beauty of meatloaf was in its versatility. Ground beef, breadcrumbs, eggs, and a handful of seasonings were all it took to create a simple yet satisfying loaf that could be served with mashed potatoes or whatever vegetables were in season. The real magic, however, came with the ketchup glaze, a tangy, sweet topping that caramelized into a crispy finish while keeping the meatloaf moist inside. This wasn't just food, it was a labor of love. After a long day, the scent of meatloaf baking in the oven felt like a warm hug, a promise that dinner would be both filling and comforting. The mashed potatoes, creamy and buttery, paired perfectly with the savory meatloaf. It was a meal that could be served at any time, whether as a quick weeknight dinner or a Sunday gathering around the table. Often, families would use leftover meatloaf for sandwiches the next day, making it even more of an economical hero. For those who grew up in the 50s, the sight of that golden brown meatloaf on the dinner table is forever etched in memory. And the mashed potatoes. Oh, the mashed potatoes. No lumps, just smooth, buttery goodness that complemented the rich, meaty flavor of the loaf. It was simple, reliable, and guaranteed to leave everyone at the table with full bellies and smiles. The kind of meal that felt like home in every bite. Chicken a la king. Chicken a la king was the kind of dish that made weeknight dinners feel a little more special in the 1950s. A creamy, savory concoction of tender chicken, mushrooms, peas, and sometimes pimentos, all swimming in a rich white sauce. It was a dish that brought a touch of elegance to the dinner table without the fuss. This was the kind of meal that made the most of leftover chicken, transforming it into something that felt both comforting and refined. It was often served over rice, noodles, or even in a puff pastry shell, adding that extra dash of sophistication that made you feel like you were dining at a restaurant, even if you were at home in your own kitchen. The true beauty of chicken a la king was its simplicity and versatility. With a few basic ingredients, you could create a filling, flavorful dish that the whole family loved. In the 1950s, when convenience was key, this dish often came together with canned cream of mushroom soup, making it an easy, quick option for busy moms. While the dish might have been born out of necessity, it certainly didn't feel like it. The creamy sauce, dotted with tender chicken and vibrant vegetables, created a comforting and rich meal that was the definition of mid-century home cooking. And let's not forget the visual appeal. Those golden, flaky, puff pastry shells filled with creamy chicken a la king were an absolute treat. It felt like a special occasion, but it could be made on any given evening. The dish exuded a warm, inviting aroma as it bubbled away in the oven, and by the time it hit the table, it was the star of the meal. Whether you were scooping it onto a plate of rice or nestling it into a buttery pastry shell, chicken a la king brought both flavor and a sense of nostalgia to every bite. Hamburger Helper, homemade version. Before it became a convenient boxed meal, Hamburger Helper was something many 1950s families made from scratch. A dish that brought together the best of hearty, comfort food and quick, easy preparation. Ground beef was the base, and from there, it was all about adding a few pantry staples like macaroni, a creamy sauce, and whatever seasonings you had on hand. This simple one-pot meal was the perfect solution for busy nights when time was short, but the need for a satisfying dinner was great. The homemade version, much like its boxed counterpart, combined the comforting flavors of beef, pasta, and cheese, creating a meal that could be pulled together in under an hour. It was the kind of meal that kids eagerly looked forward to, and moms were happy to make because it didn't require much fuss. The appeal of Hamburger Helper, even in its homemade form, was rooted in its simplicity. Ground beef was browned, and then everything else, whether it was elbow macaroni, peas, or a creamy, cheesy sauce, came together in a single pan. It wasn't glamorous, but it didn't need to be. What it lacked in complexity, it made up for in satisfaction. This dish was filling, inexpensive, and could easily be adapted depending on what you had in the pantry. If there were leftover vegetables or an extra can of tomato sauce, those could be added to the mix, stretching the meal even further. For families looking to feed a crowd without breaking the bank, Hamburger Helper was a meal that ticked all the boxes. It filled bellies and left everyone at the table feeling content, with just enough leftovers to look forward to the next day. Whether served with a side of garlic bread or a simple salad, this homemade version of Hamburger Helper was a classic example of 1950s cooking, a time when resourcefulness met comfort in the most satisfying way. Meatball subs. Meatball subs weren't just for the local diner in the 1950s. They were a beloved homemade meal that brought a bit of excitement to family dinners. Think about it. Tender, savory meatballs, smothered in rich marinara sauce, nestled into a soft hoagie roll, and topped with melty cheese. There was something special about this sandwich that made it feel like a treat, even though it could be whipped up in the comfort of your own kitchen. For busy families, it was the perfect way to make a fun, filling meal out of humble ingredients like ground beef, breadcrumbs, and a jar of tomato sauce. The beauty of meatball subs lay in their versatility. You could make the meatballs yourself, mixing ground beef with eggs, breadcrumbs, and spices. Or you could save time by using frozen meatballs and focusing on the sauce and the bread. Either way, the result was a hearty sandwich that satisfied both adults and kids alike. The warm, crusty roll would soak up just enough of the tangy marinara sauce without falling apart, while the cheese, usually mozzarella, melted perfectly over the top, creating a gooey, irresistible finish. Served with a side of potato chips or a simple green salad, meatball subs quickly became a favorite weeknight meal, offering a little indulgence without too much effort. For many families, the meatball sub was more than just a dinner option. It was a chance to get creative in the kitchen, playing with different flavors and ingredients. Maybe you'd throw in a dash of garlic or sprinkle of Italian seasoning to elevate the sauce. Or perhaps you'd load it up with extra cheese, just because. Whatever the variation, the core of the dish remained the same. A satisfying, mouth-watering sandwich that brought everyone to the table with smiles. A meal that felt special, yet was easy enough to make on a regular basis, meatball subs were a staple in many mid-century homes. Jell-O salad. Jell-O salads were as much a part of 1950s dining culture as meatloaf and mashed potatoes. At first glance, the idea of gelatin with vegetables or fruit might seem a little unusual, but back then, Jell-O was celebrated for its versatility and its ability to make an ordinary meal feel a little more festive. The 1950s were all about convenience, and Jell-O, with its vibrant colors and wiggly texture, offered a fun way to dress up a dinner spread with minimal effort. Often served as a side dish, Jell-O salad came in countless varieties, from sweet concoctions featuring canned fruit, marshmallows, and whipped cream, to savory versions that included mayonnaise, shredded vegetables, and even a touch of cheese. One of the most beloved variations was the fruity Jell-O salad. Typically made with gelatin, canned fruit, like pineapple or peaches, and a dollop of whipped cream, this bright, wiggly dish was both eye-catching and refreshing. It was often molded into shapes, perhaps a fancy ring mold, or just a simple square, and was a crowd pleaser at family dinners, potlucks, or holiday gatherings. The contrast between the sweet gelatin and the creamy texture of the whipped topping made it a surprisingly satisfying dish that was as fun to make as it was to eat. But let's not forget the savory versions, often served alongside main courses like roast beef or turkey. These Jell-O salads might include vegetables like carrots, celery, and olives, suspended in a savory gelatin base, then topped with a bit of mayonnaise for creaminess. It may seem odd to us now, but back then, they were a way to add texture and flavor to a meal without much fuss. While Jell-O salads might not be the trendiest side dish today, their place in mid-century kitchens remains undeniable. They were a symbol of the era's fascination with convenience and novelty, and even now they have a certain nostalgic charm. Whether you love them or just tolerated them, Jell-O salads were an unforgettable part of 1950s family meals. Pot roast with root vegetables. Pot roast with root vegetables was the kind of meal that defined Sunday dinners in the 1950s, a slow-cooked masterpiece that filled the house with comforting aromas and brought the family together around the table. The beauty of a pot roast lay in its simplicity and its ability to transform a tough, inexpensive cut of meat into something tender and flavorful through slow cooking. The process was almost ritualistic. A hearty roast, often a chuck or round cut, would be seared in a hot pan, then simmered for hours in a pot with onions, carrots, potatoes, and perhaps a few other root vegetables like parsnips or turnips. As it cooked, the flavors melded together, creating a savory, aromatic dish that felt like a warm hug on a plate. This dish was more than just dinner. It was a symbol of home-cooked, comforting food that didn't require much more than time and patience. While the pot roast was the star, the root vegetables played a key supporting role. The potatoes absorbed the rich broth, the carrots became tender and sweet, and the onions released their savory juices into the pot, creating a flavorful base for the entire meal. It was a meal that practically cooked itself, making it a perfect choice for busy moms who could prep everything in the morning and let it slowly cook while taking care of other household duties. There was something inherently satisfying about carving into that perfectly tender roast, its juices spilling onto the plate and pairing it with the soft, flavorful vegetables. The meal was often accompanied by a thick gravy made from the drippings, ladled generously over the meat and potatoes. Pot roast with root vegetables wasn't just a filling meal, it was a memory in the making. A meal that had everyone looking forward to the next bite and savoring the moments spent around the dinner table. Swiss steak. Swiss steak might not be the first dish that comes to mind when you think of 1950s comfort food, but for many families, it was a beloved weekly staple. A humble yet satisfying meal, Swiss steak was a way to turn a less expensive cut of beef, often round steak, into something hearty and delicious. The secret lay in braising the meat slowly in a rich, savory, tomato-based sauce, which tenderized the beef and infused it with flavor. The steak was typically pounded to tenderize it before being seared in a hot pan. then simmered gently in a thick sauce made with tomatoes, onions, and bell peppers. The slow cooking process made the meat melt in your mouth tender, while the sauce became thick, rich, and packed with layers of flavor. Swiss steak was the kind of dish that was perfect for the 1950s, when families were looking for ways to stretch their grocery budgets while still putting a satisfying meal on the table. By using a tougher cut of meat and slow cooking it, Swiss steak became a flavorful, filling dish that could feed an entire family without breaking the bank. It was often served with mashed potatoes, rice, or buttered noodles, all of which soaked up the delicious sauce and made for a meal that left everyone at the table feeling full and content. In many households, Swiss steak was a reliable go-to dish that was both easy to prepare and impressive enough for company. It may not have been as fancy as a roast or as quick as a casserole, but its humble ingredients and simple preparation made it a perfect mid-century meal. The comforting combination of tender meat and savory tomato sauce made it a dish that was enjoyed week after week, and its classic flavors still evoke the warmth and nostalgia of 1950s family dinners. Whether served on a busy weeknight or a relaxed Sunday, Swiss steak was a meal that never disappointed. Sloppy Joes. Sloppy Joes were a true icon of 1950s comfort food, a dish that could satisfy the hungriest of appetites with minimal effort. Ground beef, onions, bell peppers, and a tangy tomato sauce all came together in a skillet to create a saucy, flavorful filling that was piled high on soft hamburger buns. The beauty of Sloppy Joes lay in their simplicity. No complicated ingredients or long cooking times, just a few basic pantry staples that transformed into a hearty, satisfying meal. It was the kind of dish that families could rely on after a busy day, providing a filling dinner that everyone could enjoy, often with enough leftovers for a quick lunch the next day. Sloppy Joes were especially popular with kids who loved the messy, fun nature of the sandwich, and they quickly became a staple in 1950s kitchens. The sweet and tangy sauce with a touch of ketchup, mustard, and Worcestershire sauce brought the ground beef to life, creating a flavor-packed filling that spilled out of the buns with every bite. It was often paired with potato chips, a simple salad, or a side of coleslaw, making it a well-rounded, easy meal for the whole family. Sloppy Joes were the perfect example of resourcefulness, using inexpensive ingredients to create something hearty, flavorful, and fun. While the dish might have started as a diner favorite, it soon became a fixture in American homes, with moms making their own versions at home, tweaking the sauce to suit their family's tastes. Some families even added a bit of cheese or extra spices, making each batch a little different but always delicious. Sloppy Joes weren't just about the taste. They were about bringing people together for a simple, satisfying meal that required little more than a skillet and a few ingredients. The messier, the better. Because after all, that's part of the charm of Sloppy Joes. Salisbury steak. Salisbury steak was a classic mid-century dish that combined the comforting familiarity of a hamburger patty with the rich flavors of a hearty beef stew. Unlike your everyday burger, Salisbury steak was made from ground beef that was seasoned, shaped into oval patties, and pan-fried until golden brown. The magic happened when those tender patties were smothered in a savory brown gravy, often made from the pan drippings, creating a meal that was both simple and satisfying. Paired with mashed potatoes or rice, Salisbury steak was the kind of meal that warmed you up from the inside out, offering comfort and heartiness in every bite. The dish gained popularity in the 1950s for its versatility and affordability. Ground beef was the star, a cost-effective protein that could be transformed into something both filling and flavorful. It was easy to make in large batches, making it perfect for feeding a family. The addition of onions and sometimes mushrooms to the gravy added depth and richness to the dish, turning a humble meal into something special. For busy families, Salisbury steak was the perfect solution. It was quick to prepare, hearty enough to satisfy everyone, and could be served with a variety of sides depending on what was available. Salisbury steak became a popular choice for weeknight dinners, especially when time was tight, but a comforting, satisfying meal was still needed. The meal's simplicity allowed for variations, with some cooks adding a bit of cheese to the gravy or incorporating breadcrumbs into the beef mixture for added texture. Whether served over mashed potatoes, noodles, or rice, the tender beef patties and savory gravy made Salisbury steak a comforting classic that became a household favorite. While it may have faded a bit from mainstream menus today, it remains a nostalgic reminder of the resourceful and wholesome cooking of the 1950s. Chicken pot pie. Chicken pot pie was the ultimate comfort food in the 1950s, a dish that turned humble ingredients into a warm, filling meal that made everyone at the dinner table feel like they were being wrapped in a cozy blanket. The beauty of chicken pot pie lay in its simplicity, a flaky, buttery crust surrounding a creamy, hearty filling of tender chicken, vegetables like carrots and peas, and a rich, savory sauce. The 1950s were all about finding ways to make meals stretch, and chicken pot pie was the perfect example. Leftover chicken from a Sunday roast could be transformed into a meal that felt fresh and exciting, with minimal effort required. The pie's golden, flaky crust was the star of the show, offering the perfect contrast to the creamy filling inside. Whether homemade or made with store-bought crust, the pie was always a hit. The filling, often made with cream of chicken soup or a homemade roux, was a savory, rich mixture that clung to the chicken and vegetables, making each bite feel like a warm hug. The combination of textures, crisp crust and creamy interior, was irresistible, and the dish's rich flavors made it a family favorite that was both satisfying and comforting. Chicken pot pie was also incredibly versatile. While chicken was the most common protein, you could easily substitute turkey, beef, or even a vegetarian filling, depending on what you had in the fridge. It could be made in a large pie dish for the whole family, or individual pot pies could be baked for each person, making it perfect for serving a crowd. The dish was often paired with a simple side salad or a slice of bread to soak up the extra gravy, making it a complete meal that could feed a family for days. Chicken pot pie was the epitome of 1950s home cooking, hearty, affordable, and undeniably comforting. Fried chicken. Fried chicken holds a special place in the heart of 1950s family meals, embodying the warmth, comfort, and tradition of a Sunday dinner or special family gathering. There's just something about the golden, crispy coating that gives way to tender, juicy meat inside that makes fried chicken irresistible. In the 1950s, fried chicken was a treat that was often reserved for weekends or family celebrations, but it was a dish that could be made at home with relatively simple ingredients: chicken pieces, flour, eggs, and a few pantry staples. The real magic, of course, was in the method: seasoned flour, a hot skillet, and the perfect frying technique to ensure that each piece was crispy and flavorful without being greasy. What made 1950s fried chicken stand out was the method of preparation and the special touch added by the cook. Many families had their own secret seasoning blends passed down through generations, which made their fried chicken uniquely theirs. Some would add a dash of cayenne pepper or a touch of paprika for extra heat and flavor. The key to a perfect fried chicken was balancing the heat so that the chicken cooked through while the coating achieved that crispy golden brown perfection. When done right, the crackling sound of the chicken hitting the hot oil and the aroma that filled the kitchen was enough to get everyone running to the table. Fried chicken was often served with classic sides like mashed potatoes, coleslaw, and cornbread. Simple, comforting dishes that complemented the rich, savory flavor of the chicken. Whether it was a family gathering or a casual weeknight meal, fried chicken always brought a sense of celebration to the table. It was a dish that turned an ordinary meal into something memorable, with every bite evoking the warmth and togetherness of a family sitting down for a meal. Even today, the crispy, golden allure of fried chicken carries with it the nostalgia of 1950s home cooking, when the kitchen was a place where love, care, and good food came together in the most satisfying ways. Spam and eggs. Spam and eggs may seem like an unusual combination today, But in the 1950s, this humble dish was a regular in many households, offering a quick, affordable, and satisfying meal. Spam, the canned meat that became a pantry staple during and after World War II, was prized for its long shelf life and versatility. Paired with eggs, it created a hearty breakfast, or dinner, that could feed a family for very little money. The saltiness and slightly smoky flavor of Spam combined perfectly with the rich, creamy texture of scrambled or fried eggs, making for a simple yet filling meal that could be served in minutes. In many 1950s kitchens, Spam and eggs were the ultimate no-fuss dish, especially on busy mornings when time was tight, but the family still needed something to eat. The Spam would be sliced and fried until crispy, its edges caramelized to perfection, while the eggs were scrambled or fried to order. It was a meal that required little preparation but still provided plenty of flavor, and it was often served with toast or hash browns on the side. The beauty of Spam and eggs was that it could easily be adapted to whatever was in the pantry. Throw in some leftover vegetables, add a dash of hot sauce, or serve it with a side of ketchup. It was the kind of meal that was easy to personalize and still just as satisfying. While it may not have the glamorous reputation of other dishes, Spam and eggs were a fixture in mid-century American kitchens, embodying the resourcefulness and practicality of 1950s home cooking. It wasn't about fancy ingredients or complex recipes, but rather about making the most of what you had. And Spam provided a way to do that without sacrificing flavor. For many families, this dish was more than just food. It was a reminder of the simple pleasures of home-cooked meals, of the joy found in making something tasty with minimal effort. Beef stroganoff. Beef stroganoff was one of the quintessential fancy dishes that became a regular feature on 1950s family tables, especially for those seeking to add a bit of elegance to their weekly dinners without breaking the bank. Originating from Russian cuisine, this rich and creamy dish made its way into American homes during the mid-century, where it was quickly embraced for its luxurious, comforting qualities. In its simplest form, beef stroganoff was made with tender strips of beef, onions, and mushrooms, all simmered together in a rich, velvety sauce made from sour cream, butter, and a splash of beef broth or wine. The result was a dish that felt indulgent but was surprisingly easy to prepare. In many households, beef stroganoff was often served over egg noodles, though it could also be paired with rice or mashed potatoes, allowing the creamy sauce to be absorbed and adding another layer of comfort to the meal. The beef was usually sautéed to a perfect tenderness, and the sauce, creamy and tangy, was the star of the show. For the 1950s homemaker, the dish struck a perfect balance between sophistication and simplicity. It was a dish that seemed a bit fancy, but could easily be made with ingredients that were readily available. What made beef stroganoff such a hit in 1950s kitchens was its versatility. While the recipe often called for beef, ground beef, or other proteins like chicken or even pork could be substituted depending on availability, it was a go-to meal for special occasions like Sunday dinners or family gatherings, but it was also just as perfect for a weeknight meal when you wanted to feel like you were dining in a restaurant without ever leaving the house. In every bite, beef stroganoff delivered rich, comforting flavors with a touch of sophistication, making it a lasting favorite in American homes. The dish represented both the resourcefulness and the occasional indulgence that marked the 1950s dinner table. Macaroni and cheese. Macaroni and cheese was one of the most beloved comfort foods of the 1950s, gracing family dinner tables across the country with its creamy, cheesy goodness. It was a dish that could be made for a quick weeknight dinner or served as a side dish at a larger family gathering. The beauty of macaroni and cheese was its simplicity: cooked elbow macaroni, a rich cheese sauce, and a little bit of time in the oven to turn everything into bubbly, golden perfection. While today's macaroni and cheese might be made with artisanal cheeses or fancy pasta, the 1950s version was all about basic pantry ingredients that could be transformed into something indulgent. The hallmark of a perfect 1950s macaroni and cheese was its creamy sauce, made from a simple roux of butter and flour, to which milk and grated cheese were added, creating a smooth, velvety texture. Cheddar cheese was the cheese of choice, giving the dish that signature sharp flavor. But other types of cheese were sometimes mixed in for variety. Once the cheese sauce was made, the cooked macaroni was folded in and poured into a baking dish, often topped with a sprinkle of breadcrumbs and baked until golden brown on top. This crispy, cheesy crust was a crowning touch that made every bite of macaroni and cheese even more satisfying. Macaroni and cheese was also a perfect dish for feeding a crowd. It was filling, affordable, and could be made in large batches, making it a go-to meal for families on a budget. It was comforting without being complicated, a dish that didn't need special ingredients or fancy techniques to create something delicious. Plus, it was endlessly customizable. Some families added a bit of mustard or a dash of hot sauce to the cheese sauce for a tangy kick, while others stirred in bacon or peas to make it feel a little more like a full meal. Whether served as a main dish or a side, macaroni and cheese captured the essence of 1950s home cooking. Resourceful, simple, and utterly comforting. Tater tot casserole. Tater tot casserole, a quintessential 1950s comfort food, was a perfect reflection of the era's love for simplicity, convenience, and hearty, satisfying meals. This dish was the ideal solution for busy families looking for a meal that was easy to prepare, affordable, and guaranteed to please even the pickiest eaters. The beauty of tater tot casserole lay in its layers: ground beef, vegetables, a creamy sauce, and of course, those crispy golden tater tots on top. It was a one-pan meal that didn't require hours in the kitchen, and it could be assembled in minutes, making it a go-to dish for many busy moms. The base of tater tot casserole was usually ground beef, browned and seasoned with salt, pepper, and sometimes onion or garlic. The beef was then layered in a baking dish, often with a can of cream of mushroom or cream of chicken soup, creating a creamy, savory sauce that bound everything together. Some variations also included frozen peas or corn, adding a pop of color and a bit of texture. Once the meat and vegetables were layered and the sauce was poured over, the dish was topped with a layer of frozen tater tots, which baked to crispy perfection in the oven. As it baked, the tater tots formed a golden, crunchy top that contrasted beautifully with the creamy filling below. Tater tot casserole was not just an easy meal, it was a nostalgic favorite that felt like home. The crispy, salty tater tots were an indulgent treat, and the creamy, savory filling provided the kind of comforting flavors that brought families to the table. This casserole was a flexible dish too. Some families added a little shredded cheese on top for extra gooiness, while others stirred in a dollop of sour cream or a bit of Worcestershire sauce for added depth. It was a dish that could easily be customized based on what was on hand, which made it all the more beloved. In the 1950s, when convenience foods like frozen potatoes and canned soups were becoming household staples, tater tot casserole embodied the era's desire for meals that were both easy and filling. It was a dish that didn't require elaborate ingredients or long cooking times, but still offered the kind of hearty satisfaction that made it a favorite. Whether served on a weeknight or as part of a larger family gathering, tater tot casserole was the kind of meal that left everyone with full stomachs and smiles on their faces. Proof that sometimes, the simplest dishes are the ones we remember most. Stuffed bell peppers. Stuffed bell peppers were a beloved dish in 1950s homes, offering a delicious, versatile, and affordable way to transform simple ingredients into a hearty meal. This dish was a perfect example of 1950s resourcefulness, using inexpensive ground beef, rice, and vegetables to create a filling meal that could easily feed a family. Bell peppers, with their vibrant colors and sweet, slightly tangy flavor, were hollowed out and packed with a savory mixture, then baked until tender. The result was a comforting and flavorful meal that became a weeknight staple for many households, bringing a burst of color and flavor to the dinner table. The base of stuffed bell peppers was usually ground beef, which was browned and mixed with cooked rice, diced tomatoes, onions, and a bit of seasoning, usually salt, pepper, and sometimes a touch of garlic or Worcestershire sauce. This mixture was then stuffed into the hollowed-out peppers, which were topped with a sprinkle of cheese or a drizzle of tomato sauce, depending on the recipe. The stuffed peppers were then baked in the oven until the peppers were soft and the filling was perfectly cooked through, creating a comforting dish that was satisfying in both flavor and texture. Stuffed bell peppers were a versatile dish that could be easily customized to suit different tastes and dietary needs. Some families added additional ingredients like corn, black beans, or even grated carrots to the filling, while others used different types of ground meat, such as pork or turkey, instead of beef. The recipe was also forgiving, allowing for adjustments based on what was in the pantry. For those looking to make it a bit heartier, adding cheese on top was a common practice, and it provided that perfect melted gooiness that everyone loved. In the 1950s, stuffed bell peppers were celebrated for being both economical and easy to prepare, making them a favorite for busy families. This dish was not only an efficient use of ingredients, but it also had a visually appealing presentation, with the colorful peppers acting as the perfect natural dish. Served with a side of bread or a simple salad, stuffed bell peppers were a wholesome meal that could easily become a family tradition. Whether prepared for a busy weekday dinner or a weekend gathering, these peppers were a guaranteed crowd pleaser, offering comfort, flavor, and nostalgia all in one bite. Chili con carne. Chili con carne, or simply chili, was a beloved dish in the 1950s that captured the essence of mid-century home cooking. Hearty, flavorful, and budget-friendly. A dish that could be easily adapted to fit the needs of a family, chili was made with ground beef, beans, tomatoes, and a mix of seasonings that could range from mild to spicy, depending on the cook's preference. It was the kind of meal that simmered slowly on the stovetop, filling the house with an inviting, savory aroma that had everyone eagerly awaiting dinner. Chili con carne was often seen as the perfect solution for feeding a crowd, or making a big batch of leftovers that could be enjoyed for days. The base of traditional chili con carne was ground beef, which was browned and combined with onions, garlic, and sometimes bell peppers, creating a savory foundation. To this, a mixture of tomatoes, beans, usually kidney or pinto, and chili powder was added. The beauty of chili was that it didn't require expensive ingredients, just some pantry staples that, when combined, created a meal full of depth and warmth. Simmered for a couple of hours, the flavors melded together beautifully, with the beans soaking up the savory juices and the spices infusing every bite with warmth and complexity. For many families in the 1950s, chili was also a flexible dish, perfect for customizing based on what was available. Some people preferred to add a bit of ground pork or turkey along with the beef for a different flavor profile, while others might add extra spices or even a touch of chocolate to deepen the richness of the sauce. Chili could be served in many ways: over rice for a filling, one-pot meal, spooned onto a hot dog or baked potato, or topped with cheese and sour cream. And of course, it was often paired with cornbread or crackers for an extra bit of crunch. Chili con carne was also an ideal dish for potlucks, family gatherings, or casual get-togethers, as it could easily be scaled up to serve large groups. Its robust flavors and easy preparation made it a perfect go-to recipe for busy families looking to prepare something both comforting and satisfying. By the end of the decade, chili had become a staple in many homes, evoking the same nostalgic comfort that is still associated with this simple yet satisfying meal today. Whether served with a side of crusty bread or enjoyed on its own, chili con carne was a dish that brought families together, filling their bellies and hearts with warmth. Pork chops with applesauce. Pork chops with applesauce is a classic comfort meal that embodied the heart of 1950s home cooking. Simple, satisfying, and filled with the kind of flavors that brought families together around the table. In this dish, the savory, juicy pork chops are paired with a sweet, tangy applesauce, creating a harmonious balance between the rich, slightly salty meat and the fruity brightness of the sauce. This combination was popular for its ease, affordability, and the way it elevated a relatively inexpensive cut of meat into something truly delicious. The simplicity of the ingredients, pork chops, apples, and a few seasonings, made it a go-to dish for many 1950s families looking for a quick, filling meal that didn't sacrifice flavor. To prepare pork chops with applesauce, the chops were typically seared in a hot skillet until golden and crispy on the outside, locking in the juices and creating a delicious crust. After browning, the pork chops were either finished in the oven or simmered on the stove, allowing them to cook through while retaining their tenderness. Meanwhile, the applesauce was made by cooking down fresh apples with sugar and cinnamon, creating a sweet, fragrant sauce that complemented the savory meat perfectly. Some families even made their own applesauce from scratch, adding a homemade touch to this already simple dish. The beauty of pork chops with applesauce was its versatility. You could serve it with a wide variety of sides, making it adaptable to whatever ingredients were on hand. Mashed potatoes, rice, or buttered noodles were common accompaniments, soaking up the flavorful juices from the pork and the applesauce. For added freshness, a side of green beans or a salad made for the perfect contrast to the richness of the pork and the sweetness of the applesauce. This dish was also a favorite for special occasions, like Sunday dinners or holiday meals, when families wanted to create a memorable meal without too much fuss. Pork chops with applesauce was easy enough for a weekday dinner, but it had an air of celebration to it that made it feel a bit more special. The pairing of savory and sweet in this dish perfectly captures the 1950s love for combining simple ingredients to create something both comforting and flavorful. A dish that filled the kitchen with warmth and the table with happy faces. Baked ziti. Baked ziti was a beloved dish in 1950s kitchens, offering the perfect combination of pasta, cheese, and tomato sauce baked to bubbling perfection. It was one of those dishes that could feed a crowd and satisfy even the hungriest appetites. The appeal of baked ziti lay in its simplicity. Just a few ingredients that, when layered together, created a hearty, comforting meal that was both filling and flavorful. In an era when large families were common and time was often at a premium, baked ziti became a go-to dish that could be assembled in advance and cooked while the family went about their busy day. It also offered endless opportunities for variation, making it easy to customize based on what ingredients were available. The base of baked ziti was, of course, the pasta. Ziti, with its tubular shape, was perfect for holding onto the rich tomato sauce and gooey melted cheese. The pasta was boiled until just tender, then tossed in a marinara or meat sauce that had been simmered with garlic, onions, and a touch of Italian seasoning. Then, the pasta was layered with a blend of ricotta, mozzarella, and Parmesan cheese before being baked in the oven until the top was golden and bubbly and the cheese had melted into a creamy, irresistible layer. The result was a dish that was both hearty and comforting, with each bite providing a satisfying combination of cheesy goodness and savory tomato sauce. Baked ziti was also a dish that could easily be scaled up for large gatherings. It was inexpensive, filling, and could be made in a big casserole dish, which made it perfect for feeding a crowd. Some families even made extra portions to freeze, ensuring they'd have a meal ready to go for those particularly busy days when cooking just wasn't an option. Whether served for a family dinner, potluck, or holiday meal, baked ziti was always a hit, and it offered a hearty meal without requiring too much preparation. For those looking to jazz it up a bit, it was easy to add variations. Ground beef, sausage, or even vegetables could be stirred into the sauce, making it heartier and more filling. A sprinkle of fresh basil or a dash of red pepper flakes could add extra flavor, while a simple salad and garlic bread made the meal feel complete. Baked ziti perfectly captured the 1950s spirit: comforting, uncomplicated, and utterly satisfying. It remains a classic comfort food that brings back memories of family dinners where everyone could dig in, fill their plates, and share good food together. Beef and noodle casserole. Beef and noodle casserole was a mainstay of 1950s kitchens, offering a simple, hearty meal that could feed a family without much effort. This dish was beloved for its comforting, creamy texture and savory flavors, combining ground beef, egg noodles, and a rich sauce that was often made with cream of mushroom or cream of chicken soup. It was the kind of meal that could be thrown together in a single casserole dish, baked to bubbling perfection, and served hot from the oven. Perfect for a busy weeknight when time was short, but the need for a satisfying meal was great. It was the embodiment of the 1950s ideal: resourceful, filling, and made from ingredients that were always on hand. To make beef and noodle casserole, ground beef was browned with onions and garlic, creating a savory base that would flavor the entire dish. The noodles were boiled separately, then combined with the beef and mixed with the creamy soup, which would create the rich, velvety sauce. Some families added frozen peas or carrots to the mix, making it a complete meal in one dish. After everything was combined, the casserole was placed in the oven and baked until it was golden and bubbly. The result was a dish that had a creamy, cheesy center with a slightly crispy top, the perfect balance of textures in every bite. What made this casserole so beloved in the 1950s was its versatility and simplicity. While the basic recipe called for ground beef, it could easily be adapted to use leftover meat from a roast or even ground turkey for a lighter option. The creamy soup base could be swapped out with whatever was on hand, and the casserole could be dressed up with shredded cheese, breadcrumbs, or sprinkle of herbs for added flavor. It was a dish that could easily accommodate the preferences of a family while still being incredibly easy to make. Beef and noodle casserole also had the added bonus of being an excellent leftover dish. It tasted even better the next day, when the flavors had time to meld together. Many families would make a large batch, ensuring there were plenty of leftovers for lunch or dinner the following day. Whether served as a main dish or as part of a larger meal, beef and noodle casserole provided both comfort and ease, making it an enduring favorite of 1950s home cooks. The warm, creamy casserole captured the essence of mid-century cooking: quick, hearty, and full of flavor. Chicken fried steak. Chicken fried steak was a classic American dish that became a staple in 1950s kitchens, offering a crispy, comforting meal that combined the richness of beef with the crunch of fried coating. Despite the name, it's not made with chicken at all. The term chicken fried refers to the method of preparation: pounding a tenderized piece of beef, typically a cube steak, coating it in seasoned flour, and then frying it until golden and crispy, much like you would with fried chicken. This dish was a perfect example of mid-century home cooking: simple, satisfying, and affordable. It was hearty enough to feed a family without a hefty price tag, and it had the kind of comforting flavors that everyone could enjoy. To make chicken fried steak, the cube steaks were first tenderized through pounding, which made them more pliable and easy to cook. The steaks were then dredged in a mixture of flour, salt, pepper, and sometimes a touch of paprika or garlic powder, before being fried in a skillet with hot oil. The result was a crispy, golden brown exterior that encased the tender, juicy beef inside. The magic of chicken fried steak wasn't just in the meat, it was in the accompanying white gravy, made from the flavorful pan drippings. The gravy, typically made from flour, milk, and a bit of seasoning, was poured generously over the steak, adding richness and creaminess that turned each bite into a comforting, indulgent experience. This dish was beloved not just for its flavor, but for its versatility. Chicken fried steak could be served with a wide variety of sides, making it perfect for family dinners. Mashed potatoes, green beans, or cornbread were all common accompaniments, with the gravy often poured over both the steak and the potatoes, turning them into a mouth-watering side. It was the kind of meal that made you feel full and satisfied, the kind of dish you'd want to enjoy after a long day or as a special weekend treat. In the 1950s, when families were looking for ways to make meals that were both affordable and comforting, chicken fried steak was the perfect solution. It was easy to make, could feed a large family, and was a dish that everyone could agree on. Whether served as a Sunday dinner or a weeknight meal, chicken fried steak quickly became a beloved classic, evoking the warmth and comfort of a home-cooked meal that could bring a family together, one crispy, gravy-covered bite at a time. Scalloped potatoes and ham. Scalloped potatoes and ham was a beloved dish in the 1950s that embodied the spirit of comfort food. It was a meal that could be easily assembled with a few simple ingredients and turned into something rich, hearty, and satisfying. The dish featured thinly sliced potatoes, layered with ham, and baked in a creamy sauce until golden and bubbling. Whether it was served as a main dish or a side to a larger meal, scalloped potatoes and ham was the perfect example of mid-century cooking. Resourceful, flavorful, and comforting. It was particularly popular in households that made the most out of leftovers, using up bits of ham from a Sunday roast or holiday dinner to create a whole new meal. The base of this dish was the potatoes, which were sliced thinly to ensure they cooked evenly and absorbed the delicious sauce. A rich cream sauce made from butter, flour, milk, and often a bit of cheese was poured over the potatoes, infusing them with a velvety richness. Layers of tender ham were added in between the potatoes, giving the dish a savory bite that complemented the creamy potatoes perfectly. Once the casserole was assembled, it was baked in the oven, where the top would brown and crisp up while the potatoes softened into a luscious, creamy texture. The result was a comforting, filling meal that offered both texture and flavor in every bite. Scalloped potatoes and ham was not only a family favorite, but it was also a very flexible dish. If the pantry was running low, you could swap in leftover chicken or even bacon for the ham, and you could make the sauce as rich or light as you liked by adjusting the amount of cheese and milk. Some recipes even called for a dash of mustard, adding a bit of tang to cut through the richness of the creamy sauce. The dish could be made ahead of time and simply baked when dinner time arrived, making it a perfect choice for busy weeknights when time was limited, but the desire for a home-cooked meal was high. In many 1950s homes, this dish was a staple of family dinners because it was both affordable and filling. The comforting, creamy layers of potatoes paired with the savory, smoky ham created a meal that made everyone feel full and content. It was the kind of dish that was served with love, often paired with a simple green vegetable or a slice of bread to round out the meal. Scalloped potatoes and ham remains a nostalgic reminder of mid-century family meals, hearty, satisfying, and always made with a little extra care. Beef stew. Beef stew was a true staple in 1950s kitchens, especially during the colder months when families sought warmth and comfort from hearty, home-cooked meals. This dish was the epitome of simplicity and satisfaction, combining tender chunks of beef with vegetables like carrots, potatoes, onions, and peas, all simmered in a rich, savory broth. The magic of beef stew lay in its slow cooking, where time allowed the flavors to meld together, creating a dish that was as flavorful as it was filling. In the 1950s, when families were often trying to stretch their grocery budgets, beef stew offered a practical and affordable way to feed a large group with minimal effort. The key to a great beef stew was in the meat. Often made with tougher cuts of beef, such as chuck roast or stew meat, the beef was browned in a hot skillet to develop a rich, caramelized crust. After searing, the beef was simmered in broth or water, allowing it to break down and become tender. As the stew simmered, potatoes, carrots, onions, and sometimes celery or peas were added, absorbing the flavors of the meat and broth. Herbs like thyme or bay leaves and a bit of salt and pepper were used to season the dish, creating a warm, aromatic meal. Over the course of a few hours, the beef became melt-in-your-mouth tender, and the vegetables became soft and flavorful, all swimming in a thick, savory broth that was perfect for soaking up with a slice of crusty bread. What made beef stew so popular in the 1950s was its ability to stretch a small amount of meat into a hearty meal. It was a dish that could easily be made in large quantities, providing several meals from a single batch. It also worked wonders with leftovers, as the flavors continued to deepen and improve with each day. Beef stew was often served with a simple salad or bread, which helped to balance the richness of the dish while completing the meal. For many families, beef stew was the kind of dish that felt like home, offering warmth and comfort on a cold evening. It was the perfect meal to come home to after a long day, filling the house with savory aromas that promised a satisfying dinner. Whether served as a quick weeknight meal or as part of a Sunday family gathering, beef stew was a timeless classic that captured the spirit of 1950s cooking. Hearty, wholesome, and made with love. Liver and onions. Liver and onions was a quintessential 1950s dish that, while often divisive, captured the era's love for hearty, budget-friendly meals. Liver, typically from beef or chicken, was known for being a nutritious yet inexpensive cut of meat. Combined with the rich, caramelized flavor of sautéed onions, this dish was both filling and affordable, often making its way onto dinner tables at least once a week. It was a classic example of 1950s resourcefulness, as it provided a source of iron and other nutrients without breaking the bank. For those who loved it, liver and onions represented the ultimate in home-cooked comfort food. To make liver and onions, the liver was first lightly seasoned with salt and pepper before being quickly pan-fried in hot oil or butter to achieve a crispy, golden brown exterior. The key to a tender, flavorful liver was not to overcook it, as it could easily become tough and dry. The onions were sautéed separately, slowly cooking until they became soft, sweet, and deeply caramelized. Some recipes called for a splash of vinegar or a bit of flour to thicken the sauce, creating a rich, savory gravy that paired perfectly with the liver. The combination of the rich, meaty liver and the sweet, caramelized onions created a contrast in both flavor and texture that was adored by many. Liver and onions was typically served with mashed potatoes or rice, as these sides absorbed the flavorful gravy and rounded out the meal. A side of green beans, peas, or a simple salad often accompanied the dish, offering a light contrast to the richness of the liver. Though liver was not a favorite of every diner, for those who grew up in the 1950s, liver and onions represented a time when no part of the animal went to waste and meals were made from what was available yet still delicious and comforting. This dish was more than just a meal. It was a way to make nutritious food go further and feed a family on a budget. It was also a meal tied to tradition, often prepared by mothers and grandmothers who knew how to make the most of every ingredient. Liver and onions was one of those nostalgic dishes that, while rarely seen on modern menus, still evokes a sense of warmth, simplicity, and resourcefulness that defined 1950s cooking. Creamed chipped beef on toast. Creamed chipped beef on toast, affectionately known as SOS in many households, was a beloved breakfast or dinner option in 1950s homes. Simple, economical, and comforting, this dish made use of dried or salted beef that was rehydrated and smothered in a creamy white sauce, served over toast. The result was a hearty, flavorful meal that provided a warm, filling start to the day, or a quick, satisfying dinner after a long workday. While the name may sound a bit odd, the dish itself was a staple of mid-century cooking, offering a combination of rich, savory flavors that kept families coming back for more. The process of making creamed chipped beef on toast was straightforward and relied on ingredients that were easy to find and store. The chipped beef, often a jarred or packaged variety, was sliced thin and sautéed briefly to remove excess salt. Then, a simple cream sauce was made by melting butter, adding flour to create a roux, and gradually whisking in milk until the sauce thickened to a creamy consistency. The chipped beef was then added to the sauce and simmered until tender, and finally served over hot buttered toast. The contrast between the rich, creamy sauce and the crispy toast made every bite satisfying, and the dish was filling enough to feed a family with minimal expense. What made creamed chipped beef on toast so popular in the 1950s was its ability to stretch inexpensive ingredients into a meal that felt both comforting and hearty. It was a perfect dish for using pantry staples like dried beef, butter, and flour, and could be made quickly, which was ideal for busy families. Some variations of the dish added a bit of seasoning like pepper or mustard for a touch of tang, while others stirred in a bit of cheese for extra creaminess. Creamed chipped beef on toast was often served with a side of eggs for breakfast or as a simple dinner when other options felt too complicated. It was a meal that didn't require much preparation, but still brought the whole family to the table, making it a reliable, no-fuss favorite. Though it may not be as common on today's menus, the dish remains a nostalgic reminder of a time when simplicity, comfort, and resourcefulness ruled the kitchen, and where every meal was an opportunity to nourish and bring people together. Fish sticks with tartar sauce. Fish sticks with tartar sauce became a beloved 1950s classic, offering an easy, quick meal that could be prepared for busy families, especially on nights when cooking needed to be simple yet satisfying. The dish was often introduced to children who were unfamiliar with fish, making it a fun and approachable way to incorporate seafood into their diets. Whether homemade or from the freezer section of the grocery store, fish sticks were crispy, golden brown, and served with a creamy tartar sauce for dipping, offering a combination of textures and flavors that made every bite enjoyable. To prepare homemade fish sticks, fresh whitefish like cod or haddock was cut into bite-sized pieces, coated in breadcrumbs, and fried until crispy and golden. The process was relatively simple. The fish was dipped in beaten egg and then dredged in seasoned breadcrumbs, which could be flavored with salt, pepper, and a little paprika for an extra kick. Once fried, the fish sticks were perfectly crisp on the outside and tender and flaky on the inside. The beauty of this dish was in its versatility. Whether served as a snack, part of a meal, or even packed in a lunchbox, fish sticks were a hit with both kids and adults. For the tartar sauce, mayonnaise was typically the base, combined with relish, lemon juice, and a touch of mustard or dill. The result was a tangy, creamy sauce that paired perfectly with the crispy fish sticks, providing a cooling contrast to the warm, savory bites. Some families added finely chopped onions or capers to their tartar sauce for added depth and flavor, but the basic version was always a favorite. This simple sauce, alongside the crunchy fish sticks, became the ultimate comfort food combo for many households during the 1950s. Fish sticks were a great solution for busy moms who needed a quick meal that could please picky eaters. Frozen fish sticks were an especially popular choice, as they could be baked or fried in a matter of minutes, making them an ideal weeknight dinner option when there wasn't much time to cook. Fish sticks with tartar sauce also became a popular choice for school lunches, church picnics, or family gatherings where they could be served in large batches, easy to eat with one hand while enjoying other festivities. Though fish sticks have evolved over the years, with gourmet versions appearing on restaurant menus, the nostalgic simplicity of the 1950s version, crispy, crunchy, and dipped in tartar sauce, remains a beloved comfort food that takes us back to an era where ease, flavor, and family-friendly meals were paramount. Sloppy Joe casserole. Sloppy Joe casserole took the best parts of the classic Sloppy Joe sandwich and turned it into a one-pan, family-friendly meal that was perfect for the busy 1950s household. With its savory ground beef, tangy tomato sauce, and a comforting topping of cheesy baked goodness, it became a staple dinner option for many families. Sloppy Joe casserole was the perfect combination of quick and satisfying, a dish that could feed a large group, didn't require a ton of prep, and was guaranteed to please the whole family. It was also an ideal way to stretch a small amount of ground beef into a meal that could serve a crowd, making it a popular choice for larger families or busy weeknights. To prepare the casserole, ground beef was first browned and mixed with onions, bell peppers, and a classic Sloppy Joe sauce made from tomato sauce, ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, and a hint of mustard or vinegar for tang. This mixture was then spread in a baking dish, topped with a layer of biscuits or cornbread batter, and baked until the crust was golden and the sauce was bubbling up around the edges. The result was a comforting, layered dish with a savory, tangy filling and a soft, baked topping. Some recipes even added a sprinkle of shredded cheese on top, adding an extra layer of richness and gooiness to the already satisfying meal. Sloppy Joe casserole was beloved for its versatility. While the traditional version called for ground beef, many families swapped in other proteins, such as ground turkey or pork, depending on what was available or on sale. The casserole could also be customized with extra ingredients, perhaps a handful of frozen peas, a few more seasonings, or even some extra cheese. The beauty of this dish was that it could be adapted to fit what was on hand, making it a truly flexible and reliable meal. What made Sloppy Joe casserole stand out in the 1950s was how it took a familiar favorite and made it even easier to prepare. No need for buns or a messy sandwich. This casserole version was easy to serve, easy to eat, and perfect for families who wanted comfort food without a lot of fuss. It also doubled as a fantastic leftover dish, making it even more economical. Whether served with a side salad, some crunchy pickles, or a few slices of bread to soak up the sauce. Sloppy Joe casserole became a much-loved dish that continues to evoke memories of home-cooked simplicity and family togetherness. Chicken and rice casserole. Chicken and rice casserole was a 1950s favorite that captured the era's love for simple, hearty meals that could be made in one pan and stretched to feed a family. This dish became a go-to weeknight dinner because of its ease, affordability, and comforting flavors. It often used inexpensive ingredients, bone-in chicken, rice, and a few pantry staples that combined to create a warm, filling meal that was as satisfying as it was easy to prepare. The beauty of chicken and rice casserole was in its simplicity. A few basic ingredients slowly cooked together to create a meal that tasted like it had taken much more effort than it actually did. To prepare this casserole, chicken pieces, usually thighs or breasts, were browned in a pan to develop a flavorful crust before being placed in a baking dish. The rice was then layered beneath the chicken, often mixed with a creamy soup base like cream of mushroom or cream of chicken, which helped keep the rice moist as it cooked. Some variations included adding vegetables like carrots, peas, or celery for extra flavor and texture. A bit of broth or water was poured over the top to help cook the rice, and everything was baked in the oven until the chicken was tender and the rice had absorbed all the savory goodness from the broth and seasonings. The result was a dish with perfectly cooked rice that had soaked up all the rich flavors of the chicken, and a crispy golden skin that added a satisfying contrast to the creamy rice. One of the reasons chicken and rice casserole became so popular in the 1950s was its versatility. It could be made with a variety of ingredients, and depending on what was available in the pantry, you could easily adjust the flavors. Some families added grated cheese for extra richness, while others spiced it up with a little paprika or garlic powder. You could even use leftover roast chicken or swap in turkey for a different flavor. The casserole was perfect for using up ingredients that were on hand and could be made in a single dish, making cleanup a breeze. This dish was not just easy to make, it was also economical. A few chicken pieces, some rice, and a can of soup were all that was needed to create a filling meal, making it ideal for families on a budget. Chicken and rice casserole was perfect for a family dinner, and was even better the next day when the flavors had time to meld together. Whether served with a simple side salad or some buttered bread, chicken and rice casserole continues to be a nostalgic reminder of a time when comfort food was all about practicality, warmth, and bringing people together around the table. Tuna salad. Tuna salad was a classic 1950s dish that made use of the decade's growing fascination with convenience and simplicity. It was quick, affordable, and easy to prepare, making it a go-to for busy families or as a light lunch. Tuna, typically canned, was mixed with mayonnaise, a bit of relish, and sometimes hard-boiled eggs or celery for extra texture. The result was a creamy, flavorful salad that could be served on a bed of lettuce, inside a sandwich, or paired with crackers for a simple meal. What made tuna salad especially popular in the 1950s was its versatility. It could be dressed up with a variety of add-ins like peas, onions, or pickles, depending on what was available in the pantry. It was also a meal that could easily be made in advance, with leftovers tasting just as good the next day. Tuna salad was an ideal dish for families who wanted something quick and satisfying but didn't have a lot of time to spend in the kitchen. Whether served as a sandwich for lunch or as a side dish at a dinner, tuna salad was a staple of mid-century American cuisine, embodying the spirit of convenience and comfort. As we wrap up our nostalgic journey through these 1950s family meals, it's clear that simple, hearty dishes brought families together. These recipes, full of love and resourcefulness, remind us that comfort food never goes out of style. Thanks for joining us on this delicious trip down memory lane.